All righty, welcome everybody to Fall In, and we haven't had an episode in a couple weeks, but definitely glad to be back here with a very interesting guest. Of course, my name is Brian Britt, and I have Big Al, who is always with us here, and can't wait to talk to. I do believe Bjorn Johnson. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken. How you doing? Introduce yourself.
Hi, hey everybody. Yep, you got it right. It's Bjorn Johnson. You can pronounce it right, which is a challenge. Al knows that sometimes I have other nicknames like BJ0RN and all sorts of great things. I did have a call sign that was, as an Army aviator, is Swede, so I don't mind if people call me Swede because I'm Swedish.
Yeah,
Go
that was
figure.
one thing that we kind of talked. Me and Big Al kind of talked about in preparation for this, saying that he kept calling you the Swede and things like that. So is that just comes from your ancestry? Because you don't sound Swedish.
Oh, it's definitely from my ancestry. My dad's 100% Swede, and I've got a large percentage of Swede in me, so that's what it came from.
100%. Well, just kind of like what was your rank in the military when you left? Is kind of just the way everybody can know what plateau you kind of reached there before you left.
Sure. I retired as a lieutenant colonel, and I spent time in every rank structure the Army has. I was enlisted warrant officer and a regular line officer, so spent time in all three.
Well, that's definitely interesting. I'm sure you have a bunch of stories to tell for sure. But I kind of want to go to Big Al. Big Al hasn't said anything. I know that you kind of mentioned that you guys somewhat had a pretty close relationship. Isn't that right, Big Al?
Yeah. Known Bjorn for a number of years. Our kids kind of grew up camping together, if you will. We just kind of blended our families, and I think Bjorn and I were even roommates for a period of time.
Yes, we were. We lived together for how long was that? Almost a year, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, just short of a year.
Yeah, yeah. We've definitely known each other for a long time. Families are pretty close.
Yeah, definitely. The way that Big Al kind of characterized it was that your families kind of grew up together in a lot of ways, and definitely pretty cool. So, but he also mentioned, I know you mentioned Lieutenant Colonel, that and he was, I don't believe, in the officer ranking. I mean, did that cause any kind of conflicts? I know whenever you guys kind of saw each other around.
So no, not for real. But if anybody that knows Big Al knows that Al will pull the string if he can, and there was more.
Wait. What do you mean?
Oh, yeah, whatever. Al would definitely poke that bear or pull the string on something like, well, whatever you say, sir. And but no, it was all in jest.
Just a sarcastic sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, if there were, and Al and I didn't have very many opportunities to work side by side in the military professionally. I do know that would have been a professional relationship, but on the personal side, when we were together, as families and hanging out and living together, I mean, it was everything you would expect it to be. It was a good time, and there was no division of rank between the two of us as per se.
Now, I'd love to get a little bit more background information about, like, the decision to join the military, what your life was looking like before you did that, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I joined the military while I was in college. I joined in the summer of between my freshman and sophomore year, 1986. And really, I joined. I was encouraged to join by a roommate of mine who had been in the military active duty and was then off and in college after separating from the service. At least as an active duty soldier, he was in the reserves or guard at the time. And so I joined, and I joined as an enlisted person with the goal of being in ROTC to get my commission, and I did that ultimately. Finished college and got my commission, and as a member of at the time the Army Reserves in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, I was sent to flight school, and so as far as my motivation, there was a large history of my family, almost everybody, and I really have to think. There's only one person that I can think of that was in the Army, and that was one of my grandfathers. Everyone else had joined the Navy, and was in the Navy or served in the Navy. That's my uncles served in the Navy, and other folks served in other military, but one in the Army. And so I felt like I wanted to serve our country, but there was it was an encouragement by friends, and that made me join, and so that's why I did it.
I got you. Now, did that cause any conflicts though? Because I know a lot of the branches kind of butt heads a little bit. Navy versus Army.
So I mean, no, not in inner, not
Just
in.
maybe been joking around.
No,
But you know what, though, Bjorn? If I could butt in here, though, it makes a lot of sense now because you kind of strike me as a naval guy.
thanks. Wow.
See, that's what I was talking about. That kind of stuff right there. Big Al coming through with an example right in front of us.
Yeah, that would be it. Yeah, pulling the string. Yeah,
That's it.
no,
Yeah.
it was. There was no conflict with my family. Now there is a long history of some going back and forth between the services, and so that still exists. Heck, in the service, there's going back and forth against your branches, and but really when the rubber hits the road, and people, we're a team, and we're an organization, and we come together every time. Never seen groups not come together. Afterwards, we love to joke with each other about who's better or who's worse.
Now that kind of brings me back to Tammy's interview that we had just a few weeks ago, to where she kind of said something similar to where, yeah, we'll give them hell, but if anybody, it's like picking on your little brother or something like that. Like you'll pick on them, but if they're at school and someone's picking on them, you defend them.
Why don't you just accept the analogy that I give you? The Arabs have a saying, and it says, "Me and my brother against my cousin. Me, my
Yeah.
brother, my cousin against a stranger."
Well, that's essentially what it is.
Yeah, we look at each other, through the various branches of service as, well, like obviously the Navy is our sister and the Marines are our little brothers. You know what I mean? That's just kind of that's the little rifts between the different branches. So,
Yeah. Well, and even like I said, in the aviation branch, you have multitudes of airframes, from fixed wing, rotor wing, attack helicopters, utility helicopters, and you can be sure that they each give each other a ribbing about their various, as an Apache guy, we're flying gunships, and we're all full of, piss and vinegar and testosterone. And we'll tell the utility guys that they're just glorified bus drivers, or something like that. But again, at the end of the day, we're all teammates, and we know we can't do it without each other. So.
Wow, that's mean. Y'all are glorified bus drivers, man. I bet that definitely probably would hurt my feelings, but I'm a civilian, so it makes more sense.
it's one of those things. It's one of those things where you just kind of accept that because like I told you earlier, Brian, aviation is the only branch that's all three, which is combat arms, combat service, and combat service support. So,
Right.
we get to fit in. Everything from medevac to assault. So yeah, it's kind of a slipper that fits everyone's feet, if you will.
Yeah.
Now I was told that you actually went to flight school though, so like that means you were actually a pilot. Like you were flying you were using the Apaches, from what I've heard from Big Al.
Yeah, I closed out my career flying Apache Delta model longbows, but I started with Hueys in training, and then was qualified in the Cobra, so the AH-1 F model Cobra, and flew that for a while, and then Alpha model Apaches, which is the first model of Apaches that came into the Army inventory in the mid 80s. I'm sorry, yeah, mid 80s. That's right. And but I finished as a Delta model Apache longbow pilot. I was a maintenance test pilot as well, so I was a qualified maintenance test pilot, and spent my time, fixing the aircraft and preparing them for, our team and our unit to fly them. But we don't just fly as maintenance test pilots. We're part of the combat crews as well. So we're out there flying in the combat missions because you want a maintenance guy along. If you have a problem, a maintenance guy can potentially fix it or potentially fly it back. You can swap seats, and the maintenance guy is authorized to potentially, depending on the issue with the aircraft, they can take the aircraft back. Whereas standard IP or PI pilot, a PC, would not be authorized to fly back in most cases.
Well, that's pretty smart though. To, I think have you guys cross trained in a lot of ways. So I mean, you went to flight school, did you go overseas and have to actually fly combat missions and things of that sort?
Of course, yeah. I spent 3 different times. I went to Germany twice in 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 an Apache unit in the 6th Cav in 11th Aviation Regiment in Illesheim, Germany. I've got 5 combat deployments, and so yeah, I've definitely got combat time. It is. I don't know. I'm just humble about it. That's all there is to say about it. It's one of those things that I don't like to brag about it because I don't like bragging about war. I did my job, but I definitely had combat deployments and combat time.
Now you mentioned Germany. Now that kind of confused me about combat missions in Germany. I mean, in Germany, it's not really an active war zone or anything like that. Was it in Germany that some of the combat missions took place, or?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to confuse anybody that's listener or to the listeners or you. Germany was where I was overseas, and then you had mentioned overseas. As far as the places I've been to, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Bosnia. Now, almost all of my flight combat time has been in Iraq. I did go to Afghanistan as an advisor as well. That was not flying. I wasn't flying in Afghanistan.
Don't forget you forgot to mention Saudi Arabia.
Well, I went to Saudi Arabia as well. So, I mean, I've been to other places too. Albania. I had combat time in Albania, Kosovo specifically. We staged out of Albania initially, went into Kosovo, and then later on we staged out of Macedonia and flew into Kosovo, and that was also combat time. But so, yeah, I've been other places. Been to Saudi Arabia for a year. Again, I was a logistics guy in Saudi Arabia, helping field Apaches, Blackhawks, and AH-6I helicopters to one of their National Guard brigades. So my job there was more of an acquisitions job than it was flying helicopters for them.
Now, Bjorn, just for the record here, let me. You were actually deployed to Bosnia out of Illesheim, right?
No, so the unit but that was before my time.
Okay.
Matter of fact, they got back from their Bosnia tour just months before I was assigned there. When I was in Bosnia or assigned to Bosnia, I had come out of the National Guard on a National Guard Title 10 tour, so they'd activated our unit, and so
Did we lose you, Bjorn?
No.
I think we kind of had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. We weren't able to hear what you just said.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I got a phone call while I was talking to you, and apparently
okay.
My audio. I'm not exactly sure where you last heard.
You were saying that when you went to Bosnia, you were saying the unit that you were in it just got back when you were there, but
yes,
you were out of the National Guard.
The Illesheim unit had just gotten back when I was assigned to the Illesheim unit as an active duty guy. So it sounds a little goofy, but you got to understand my timeline and what I did. I was in the National Guard up until 1997 and went active duty in 98. So when I went to active duty in 98, I was assigned to 6 Cav in Illesheim, Germany. So that's where I went. But in 96, 97, I was in the National Guard in Minnesota, and we had been activated to support the mission in Bosnia. So I worked for the headquarters. I worked for the G3 in Heidelberg, Germany, and would go down to Bosnia to various places, Skopje, and I'm trying to remember one of the bigger ones. But and we would go down to Bosnia and as part of our G3 plans and support that we did for that mission. Again, I wasn't flying in Bosnia.
Okay.
Definitely. So for a long time, like you said, you were just in the National Guard. So like that was kind of more just calm. And then did they kind of pull you into enlistment, like to where, or maybe on active duty, I should say?
Yeah. So again, a little more background without boring anyone to death. After flight school, well, really, I was sent to flight school as part of the Army Reserve. So they had a slot given to them by the Army to train Army aviators, and I filled that slot, and I came back from flight school to my reserve unit. there was a time when the Army did a realignment, ARI, Army Realignment Initiative, and they took combat arms and they moved it all with very little exception, but they moved all combat arms to the National Guard. And they put all the combat service support in the reserves, as far as the reserve and guard system goes. So when I moved over to the Guard, because the Army moved everybody to the Guard that flew Cobras, I was flying out of the Guard at the time. And again, we got the deployment order to go to Bosnia, but I was a captain. I was the Delta Company commander, and I moved over there as a DESOPS plans guy as a captain. Then, when I went on active duty, I resigned my commission as a captain and was direct commissioned to warrant officer, and I flew as a W-2, W-3, or W-2 promotable my entire time in active duty before I was reassigned as a captain and took my commission back, and then later on, earned major and lieutenant colonel and retired.
Now, how did that work exactly, Bjorn? How did you go from being a W-2 promotable to back to captain?
Well, I won't bore you with the form numbers or anything, but it was a simple request.
Okay, so you wanted to do that.
Yeah, I kind of, not because I didn't enjoy the heck out of what I was doing, but in true open book, I wanted different opportunities for myself when I retired. And so if I make a general statement that a warrant officer is more sought after for flying positions when they retire because they are the technical experts, they have all the flight experience, etc. And I kind of saw myself as wanting to do something more in the higher level management. And again, when I retire, and so I was trying to pave that road for myself at retirement. And so I asked for my commission back, and with support of my unit, which was, they were very supportive of that, and they thought that it was a good fit. I was accepted and basically went back to being a captain.
And that's definitely very interesting, just considering you also, Lieutenant Colonel, you definitely got really high up in the ranks. Was that initially the goal? Was it because you had the college education? Like, what's the path difference between, maybe something that a guy that just enlists normally versus someone who enlists from college and completing their college courses and then going on to do what you did?
Sure. Well, generally speaking, to be a commissioned officer in the Army, you have to have a college degree. Our warrant officers are commissioned as well, and the college degree is not required. It's highly encouraged, as you move up the rank structure in the warrant officer corps. And I may be misspeaking. I still don't believe it's a requirement in the warrant officer rank structure to have a degree. But yeah, I didn't think it was. I knew it wasn't. I just didn't know if they'd changed anything.
They're still doing high school to flight school, as far as I know.
Absolutely, and even in the RLO, regular line officer or regular commission officer, it's not a requirement to have your degree before your commission, but you cannot make the rank of captain without a degree. And again, probably speaking a little out of turn of the process, but a degree is required to be a regular officer in the Army. So having the degree allowed me the flexibility to maintain, retain, go back and be a captain, and later on earn major and lieutenant colonel. And as far as education during your service, very, very similar. There are parallels in how we train our corps, and they start off with your basic course, then you go to your advanced course, and then you go to senior courses. And so no matter what rank structure you're in, the Army's is designed to move you along as you grow and mature as a soldier, as a person. And so you do senior courses no matter what rank structure you're in. And nowadays, we even we bring people in from the other rank structures to courses. So, for example, I went to my most senior course I went to was CGSC, Command and General Staff College. That CGSC course, when I went, we had folks that were warrant officers and senior enlisted and that was a recent change at the time, 2009, 10. circa 2009-10, where they were bringing in folks from the other rank branch, from the other rank structure, like enlisted and like warrant officer, and even foreign services, and we bring them in, and that's a way for us to develop those folks in those rank structures to understand each other and how we work, and so that is not unusual today. I know they do that.
Yeah, definitely not a bad idea to just kind of include, different. That's interesting though. Foreign, so like, even from other countries, like an armed force member there could come in and sit in on one of those classes.
Absolutely, we have exchange. I don't know the details because I was never in the RC structure, which is Human Resources Command or anything like that. But our allies, it is very common for us to trade not only school assignments, but actual operational assignments. So as an example, it is not unusual to see let's just say a Norwegian pilot serving in an American unit, and vice versa, an American pilot serving in a Norwegian.
Or a Swedish pilot.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I say not unusual. It's not super common. You don't find one in every unit. But it's done, and it's done on purpose because we want to understand how each other's services, how we operate, and that better allows us to synchronize when we do combat arms or combined arms, and we're doing it together against a common enemy.
Yeah, we always had an Australian at Fort Campbell.
Yeah, Australians. I had an Iraqi in my CGSC class. In my group, we have a small group, so you have a large class of maybe 500 or something like that officers, and then you have small groups. And in my small group, we had an Iraqi officer, a major.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. So, I mean, it definitely seemed like everybody in there was committed to trying to learn from each other. I think that's the biggest part of that, trying to learn from each other. And I'm sure you saw a lot, though, in your combat operations to where you actually had to, do those missions side by side, like you said, with other people from other countries and things like that. I mean, especially in Iraq. I mean, I think that was like a little bit of a coalition, wasn't it?
Yeah, yes, it was a coalition. Me personally, I didn't have a lot of experience, personal hands-on experience with flying with coalition units in combat missions or anything like that. And I can't really speak to how common that might be. I think what happens is we'll often work side by side, maybe in a supporting mission, where they've got their piece of the combat battlefield, and we've got our piece, and maybe it's done at a higher level where it's organized and synchronized. But I mean, it's pretty rare to get. I can't speak for the Army. I don't know about the Air Force and how they work, or Navy. But for the Army to work side by side in the aviation and flying the mission together, where maybe you've got a German attack helicopter alongside an Apache, I've never seen that. I definitely am not going to say we don't do that, but mostly when we come together and train, it's more about talking and training and studying doctrine and talking, and learning lessons learned from each other's various, experiences, because other countries have experiences in other areas, whether that's a different geographic location, cold weather, Alaska, or Russia, or maybe a hot desert location somewhere in Africa, or somewhere where we've not been recently, but they have. So that's how you learn a little bit about the doctrine.
Yeah, definitely to be able to tackle those challenges that they might have already dealt with. Yeah, that definitely sounds like it could be very useful. I mean, but one question I kind of came to mind was, the thought of friendly fire. With the coalition and even people that are in the U.S. Army, was there ever any like cases of friendly fire? Because I mean, you're flying around in a helicopter; it's hard to have all the information.
So no, there was none that I was directly involved with, or close units where we had incidents that were listed or determined to be friendly fire incidents. I'm sure it's been done. You've seen it. We've all seen the stories where there's a friendly fire incident. I will tell you, the Army takes great strides to prevent that. We train. We have threat ID classes. We have threat ID requirements where We get tested on them, and so as aviators, we have to be able to readily recognize what we know the common enemy vehicles and the common friendly vehicles, and we're tested on that, quite stringently, and it's an annual test, so it's not something you get tested once and you go, okay, German vehicles and Russian vehicles, you did a great job, or Iraqi vehicles or Chinese.
Yeah, and to note too, just on that point, Bjorn, but the warfield, the battlefield, it's very dynamic. It's not fluid, so it's changing constantly. So especially for gun guys or whatever, you're always having to update, what the target actually looks like. Is because in Iraq we had a huge problem with IEDs, right, Bjorn?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. And like you said, it's no longer gone, or at least today, as we talk about it, gone are the linear battlefields, and instead we have asymmetric warfare where it's everywhere. Everywhere you turn, the enemy could be, and also everywhere you turn, the friendlies could be. So for sure, there's a you got to be on your toes, and you really got to be able to recognize. And often not even often, we rely heavily on our intel. So we've got intel folks that give us briefings before missions, provide us as much detail as they can possibly provide, and so we already have some expectations as we go, and we're already thinking about recognition, and we're already thinking about battlefield orientation, and yes, battlefields are dynamic, but with that intel, it helps you get a clearer picture of the battlefield before you enter it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's going to stay that way, because you're getting intel briefs daily. This is so all of this information is coming, and they're using that in the air as well as on the ground. So, Bjorn, I'm gonna hijack the show here just a little bit to talk about some of those missions that you flew in Iraq as a gun guy. How many times you guys actually blown up somebody?
Well, early on, it was a lot more often than later. And then there was, escalations time, 2007 again, Iraq started in 2003. And then in 7, there was the surge. And so we had a lot of battlefield engagements, sometimes daily. I would put it to you this way: at the beginning of the war, there's probably daily events where you're engaging direct fire with the enemy. And later on, your mission as an Apache guy would be to escort either a ground convoy, do a movement to contact in an area where you have suspected enemy and you may or may not get contact. And of course, there was a lot of ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. We called it. I mean, ISR is what we called it. ISR missions. And so sometimes you're just out there with your capabilities, whether that's a radar or a visual optics, and you're recording activity but an overwatch. There's so many missions, and we can do multi-role with an Apache. Some will argue, we can't do it well, but you can be a scout helicopter and an Apache because of our systems. You can be an attack helicopter, and so you get a variety of missions to do. As a percentage, I would say that the percentage of direct combat engagements, are much lower than they are than the non-combat, non-direct fire engagement missions, and that's just a product of the war we were in. But Afghanistan was pretty hot, heavy a lot for a long time, and I didn't fly in Afghanistan, so I can't speak to that.
But you were present in Afghanistan around those that were flying and fighting?
For sure. Yeah, I've got a lot of. Yeah.
So here's a question I'm going to ask you kind of directly. Could you notice a difference in, say, a vanilla gun guy who, slick sleeve, new to the cockpit, versus the guy who, he's an ace with multiple kills? And I guess where I'm going with this is that because you're actually firing from the helicopter, does that take a toll mentally, or is it just like throwing major league pitches?
I don't. I think that from the outset, just looking at someone without a having a conversation or flying with them, you might not be able to tell. But is certainly having conversations, flying with someone, getting to see their demeanor in the cockpit, their voice inflection in situations or something like that, and have there be no doubt that when you're in an engagement, it's an exciting, stressful time, and outside of that, it's much different. And so the stressors, everyone deals with them differently. Some people have, come back from missions and had PTSD, or just sometimes we take the D out of it nowadays. So I'm just speaking frankly, it's PTS, post-traumatic stress. It's not a disorder. And if we take the disorder word out of it and we can start talking about it more of it's normal when you're engaged in something like that. I will also say that our society has post-traumatic stress in everything outside of the military. If you're in a situation that has you scared all the time because you're in I won't name them all, but you could have a very bad home environment. You could have had a very bad car accident and have post-traumatic stress. I mean, post-traumatic stress is just it is what it is, and it's how you deal with it. So the Army made a big effort to train us and present and show us that there are different ways to deal with stress. And so they had a big program that they did. Al, do you remember what year they started doing the programs for handling stress? I want to say it was like in the around 2005 or 7, somewhere in that range.
Could you be more specific?
Yeah. Trying to think of the term they use for it. Give me a minute. I'll go back to it. But so they would train. That training was classroom training. It gave us avenues of how we, who could we talk to, how we can best deal with it. And it gave us ways to realize that it's normal to have stress from combat, and then to say, well, I'm not, and you don't feel like when you go to seek help that you're an outsider, or that you're different. And so basically that was their effort, and they pushed hard on that. And that way you weren't afraid to go seek help, whether that was from a friend or from an actual, counselor of some sort, whether that's a chaplain, or an actual counselor, medical counselor.
And as we sit here and we're talking, and Brian's always like, "Well, tell a story," but we jumped into the mental health thing, and I'm sitting here and during that first rotation, I remember I made my way up to Mosul, and I'm in Bravo Company. Well, they next thing you know, I'm the headquarters platoon sergeant. So where I'm going with this, and I inherited a guy that was having post traumatic stress, but we're at war, and this guy has to go over and sit in a group circle, and he's trying to get out of theater is what he's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just the way I looked at him, felt about him, thought about him, just because I was having to go over there with him and sit there in these little group circles, and we're at combat, and I just remember while you were sitting there talking, I'm just remembering how I looked at that guy who was kind of going through that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sounds like
and
you might
how
have prejudged him a little bit, though. If you think he was just trying to get out of theater, or was he really suffering him? And maybe hindsight is a little bit better now.
Oh yeah, well I finished the book on it, and I'm not going to talk about the little dude just because he's a local guy, but I think I made the right assumption. You know what I mean? It's just that you don't want to always, especially as a leader, you don't want to question people, but you kind of got to know your soldiers. That's why I was asking you about the gunners, knowing the guys that are in the cockpit, because if you know people, it's a lot easier to kind of spot if something's off. than if you don't know them, trying to figure out what their behavior's like. That's kind of where I
By
was
figuring
going.
out their baseline, you already know their baseline, kind of, and if something's off of that
Absolutely.
baseline, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to know the same thing with even your equipment. You have to know that. You have to establish a baseline. So,
Right. Yeah, and I knew it wouldn't take me too long to figure it out, but so the training, and I know you'll remember this now too, Al, but they did resiliency training, and resiliency training for the military was just adopting some civilian stuff that the medical field had come up with for anybody that had some sort of stress. And so they sent us through this resiliency training regularly. Annually, you'd have rebluing of that and taking it again. And it was encouraged, that to take steps. PT is a resiliency training. When you do physical training, it helps you reduce those stressors that are physiological in your body. And just having a day out with your friends can be resiliency and build up your resiliency because you get a chance to talk about it. So like you said, Al, when you know somebody's at risk, maybe they've had a bad mission or several missions, or just maybe having a tough time dealing with whatever it is they're doing, just taking off and flying outside the confines of a military forward operating base under the security of the the things we have there, gate guards and guns that shoot down rockets and stuff like that. You feel a little safer. The second you have to cross, you're already stressed. You're leaving the confines of the safety of the forward operating base. So just flying straight level and going somewhere, you're already stressed. So people are going to handle that differently. And so we did the resiliency training so that we could find and teach and inculcate into our organization's way to deal with that, and hopefully reduce suicides, where people couldn't handle the stress, couldn't leave. Units are, generally speaking, not going to just let you go home because you're stressed out. Like Al was talking about, somebody wanted to find their way home. Instead, we found ways to deal with that as a unit.
but Bjorn, let me ask you this question, because you're a leader. You're one of those senior level leaders. Do you think that we, especially through your tenure, my tenure in post, do you think that we actually did a good job of dealing with mental health? And I'm talking about like off the charts, like a real conversation. Do you think that we did a good job of dealing with the mental health issues?
Yeah. Um, I'll answer your question, on an off the charts from my opinion, from my seat as I saw it. And I would say that we did as well as we could do in the dynamic, ever changing situation that we are in. These long, back to back, continual deployments. We, as a member of the military, you don't get a vote a lot of times for a lot of things. You just don't get a vote. You've signed up to defend the nation, and whatever the nation asks you to do, you go do it. And so in cases of our service members that had back-to-back deployments away from their family, the stressors of all their stressors, they could be financial stressors, they could be combat stressors, they could be personal stressors of family going, at home, a mom or dad not doing well. You never know. But we trained, we presented classes, we brought people in, we told people how to recognize the indicators of, and so I'm going to say that we did a good job of presenting it to the formations and giving them the tools. I'm not sure the numbers reflect that, when you look at the suicides and the rate of suicide. But I also, how many years, 20 years we were at war in Afghanistan. I mean, this isn't
That sorry.
no, it's just not other, it's not the same as other times where maybe it was 4 years or 5 years of war and you spent 2 or 3 away in World War II at a much different environment, for sure. I'm not even comparing the environments, but when you think about the back to back to back and you're not home, and so I think we did a pretty good job, and we reacted. The military's often reactionary based on the what it's faced with. But I think we did okay, Al. I really do. I do know that there's still a high number of folks with post-traumatic stress or stress and suicides. And I think we should continue to push to reduce those in any way we can. And we rely on our medical professionals and folks that come to the Army from the medical profession and psychiatric to help do that, to help train us. And good leaders won't look negatively upon somebody seeking out help. And that was something we had to teach our formations. How often did you see somebody that maybe needed help and you thought, well, they're not flying anymore, or maybe they're shunned by the community, that black sheep. That definitely happened, I'm sure. I can't really specifically think about a time where I knew somebody that was having trouble and we didn't bring them in the group and and take care of them. I'm not saying that, but I know it does.
Well, I think the whole thing is too. I bet it make the guy don't want to feel weak. I mean, of course, if he knows he's going to be sidelined, then he might not be open and honest about what he's actually feeling.
100%. Yeah, I'm going to have to say for sure. Even myself, I can tell you that I would not have been real gung ho about bringing up an issue and have it become known, whether that was to my command or to my brothers, that I was having an issue. So I think that's human nature. So 100%, I'm going to say that until you can break that barrier, you're going to continue to have that problem. You're going to have the stigma. And it's very hard to break that. I mean, that's human nature. The weakness. You've shown weakness. And as soon as, at least, okay, I just basically fed into that. You've shown a weakness. But yet today we say when you recognize it and announce it and go seek help, that's actually a strength.
Yeah, I remember because I even had to tell my guys this, because it was almost. I mean, we were in Iraq. This would have been, I believe, 05, 06 iteration, and I had a guy that was working there, and I literally told him, I said, "Hey, man, sometimes it's okay to cry. It's okay to cry because I know your dad probably told you, don't cry, grown men don't cry, but I guarantee you, your daddy ain't never dealt with what you're dealing with right now. Sometimes it's okay to not be okay." But where I was going to go with the next question, Bjorn, because I was kind of feeding into this line, you also had a very unique perspective in the fact that not only did you have back-to-back deployments per se, because you also have to take and put schooling in there. Just because you're home doesn't necessarily mean you're home, but you have a family as well. So my question to you is, how much of a difference do you think your military service made on you raising your family? Say if you just worked, and I'm just going to say if you just had a normal civilian job by in which you were able to be available 99% of the time and kind of manage your own schedule.
Yeah. Well, for me, that was probably the biggest stressor, and of course, looking back, I have the benefit of 2020 hindsight as I say what I'm about to say, and that is, I felt like I left my kids wanting in many situations because I wasn't there to be the father directly. There was phone calls, there was letters, there was a R&R for a week or two, or but look, when you're not there every day and you're gone for whatever reason, because as Al alluded to or said, even when you're home, you're gone. I had an assignment at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where I was an observer trainer. And I said Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. I didn't say Iraq. I didn't say Korea. I didn't say Saudi. And that particular couple of years in my assignment there, I spent greater than 180 days out of each year gone, away, not deployed, but traveling somewhere to train other units and as an observer trainer. So again, even at home, you're not home. So I missed a lot. And it was hard, and photos, thank God for digital photos and internet and stuff like that. So again, that changed too. You think about any time before the internet, and when people were gone, they were pretty much gone. You could make a phone call, but today you can video teleconference, stuff like that, and you can see things, but you're still not there. And I I look at that as an advantage to the folks that aren't in the military, that they got to be there, or at least they had the opportunity, to be there for a lot of things that we miss in the military. That's a big stressor for me. I wished I could have been there for everything, and I just couldn't be. And we had a strong family. I have a wife, Sherry, who is absolutely amazing and has really held us together through a lot. And she
Hey,
continues.
Sherry.
And she's not here, but she's outside, but she's
Well, I'm
here.
just giving a shout out to Sherry, so when she does hear this, she'll hear me giving her a shout out.
Yeah. No, she's continually held us together, and today she holds us together in a different way. We deal with a son-in-law that's gonna die likely from terminal cancer, brain cancer, and she's still holding us together long distance. They live in Kansas, we live here. And it's good to have a great spouse, and I was lucky.
That's awful to hear. Definitely prayers to your family dealing with that kind of a thing. That's got to be awful.
Yeah, and he was military too. He's now a separated, medically retired. He was an Air Force pilot. So she married into the military. And actually, I want, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go back. And it's still on the subject of mental health. Using all my experience, my 31 years, 2 months and 10 days that I spent in the military, my daughter joined the military, Megan. She joined the military as an MP, so she's enlisted. She's since risen to the rank of staff sergeant, and so she's doing well. But I kid you not, her first assignment at the 101st Airborne Division was to a murder. She didn't know it was a murder at the time, but her first patrol night, she was on, and she gets called to a shooting or stabbing, and she had to show up to that and try to save this person's life while calling for help, et cetera, waiting for medical people to show up. And at the end, a month or two later, when they figured out that the person wasn't just didn't kill themselves, but actually was murdered. But we talked to her a lot about right out the gate. I said, okay, you should go talk to somebody about that. That is a high stress environment. You're a police officer. You show up. You think there's a high stress event going on. And I tried to impart upon her to go talk to her chaplain, to talk to leaders that maybe dealt with the same situation, or to talk to a medical professional, and just to talk, because regardless of whether she felt like I was encouraging her, whether she felt stressed or whether she felt like that was something that she didn't want to talk about, I thought she should, and so I encouraged her to do that.
And Bjorn, to this point, because this is the same. It's not it kind of your daughter and my son both joined the military. Shout out to you, Megan. But Megan was raised in the suburbs, so
Yeah.
she, even though her dad was out there mixing it up and flying over mountains to shoot at bad guys and coming back, because you kind of are like Superman, she was never exposed to that. So and she wasn't exposed to like real high tense family. All of our families have to be somewhat sane, because we can't even be around somebody that doesn't have a security clearance. So that takes all of the felons out. But I'm saying that to say this, that so she just wasn't really around a lot of trauma or
No.
drama, if you will.
Humans are products of their environment, and you can be sure that Megan wasn't a product of an environment that she is now a product of, or that she's now experiencing. So you're right. Yeah. And I encourage her to seek out help, and only because today we really push that is not a weakness, that it's a strength too. Because think about this. Our folks in the military are an investment. We are an investment. For me as a pilot, I'm a higher dollar investment because it takes a year to train me, and but so not to demean anybody at what they did, but when you are an investment, you don't want that person to get hurt mentally or physically, and when you can do something about it, the physical part, I can't stop bullets from hitting me per se, and I can't stop myself from breaking a leg unless I training or something like that. But the mental part, this is where the leaders get a chance to interject. And the leaders get a chance to encourage you to go talk to somebody, so that you don't become a mental casualty, a casualty of mental illness. And because you're hard to replace. It takes time, it takes effort, money, and investment. And why do that when you can do preventative stuff? And so that's, I think, the environment we need today, is to make leaders realize that sending people to get help, encouraging people, recognizing the signs, those are ways to save on your investment, to continue to retain that asset that you have and that person.
Yeah, you can build another gun, you can build another tank, but you can't replace the human.
No, not easily. It takes time, and we all like to think we're irreplaceable. So I know Al was definitely irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Oh, ouch!
I said
I had some irreplaceable.
Irreplaceable. Well, thank you, sir. As yourself, touche.
I had some questions though about like you were mentioning about you could get shot or something like that when you're in the Apache, you're in those helicopters. Like how vulnerable are you in that pilot seat? I mean, like if someone was to maybe pull an AK out and start firing on your aircraft, was that something that would be concerning?
Oh, certainly. Anytime you're in a direct fire engagement, it's concerning. I got to learn firsthand, how durable the aircraft is and how survivable it is, even if for say you did get shot down to the point where you had to crash land or do a controlled landing or something like that. So it's definitely concerning. I have a specific engagement on the 23rd of March at the beginning of the war. They made my crew chief, one of our crew chiefs in our unit, but he worked with me often. Later became a producer of films in California, out in Hollywood, and he decided at one point to produce a documentary film about that night. And so he did that, and so that particular night, I had 20 plus direct hits on my aircraft in various places, none of which killed or hit myself or my co-pilot, Cornell Chow. And but close, very close. Rounds entered both of our cockpits. Were entered and perforated by rounds of various types. And we lost almost all of our systems. We lost hydraulics. We lost the utility side. All we had was the primary, which allowed us to keep flying. But so it's a very survivable aircraft. There's armor in the seats, but I'm kind of a big guy, probably too big sometimes. But so there's portions that are exposed too. So that armor doesn't protect you everywhere. There's a blast shield between the co-pilot gunner and the pilot, so that let's say you had a very big round come in that maybe an RPG or something. There's the potential to survive as a pilot if one of the others cockpits were to be blown up by an RPG. You could survive if the aircraft did, because that shrapnel wouldn't potentially hit you. So, I mean, there's a lot of protections built in and redundancies and flight controls and things like that.
That's very interesting because I mean that was kind of what I was wondering. Like if small arm fire would still have an effect to where you could, like the glass there you were looking out of. I mean, was that bulletproof in a way or?
Oh, there's nothing on the aircraft and small arms historically. So look this one up in some fact checker later if you want. But historically, small arms is the largest reason for us to lose helicopters was small arms fire. And we had a very long in the tooth pilot named Warren Alworth, who tried very vehemently to tell us, and he was our master gunner and senior guy, and he said, look, we need airspace higher than 500 feet, and we didn't get it. The way the combined arms thing went, they gave us 500 feet and below, or 1,000 feet. I can't remember. It might have even been 700 at the time. But basically they said, no, you're not going to get that. Well, if you think about how far a small arm can shoot, you're right in their range. 500 feet, and so small arms is a big deal, and it definitely can go through almost anything. That with the exception of some of the armor, that the physical armor on that seat that protects us. And there's some physical armor around some things like engines and transmissions, but think about it this way: the more armor you put on the helicopter, the heavier it is. So instead, they rely on redundancies.
But also, Brian and Bjorn can just to give you another idea, that helicopter really isn't that big and it's pretty sleek, but it's over a mile of wiring in that thing as well.
Wow.
So
hundreds of miles of wiring, actually. Yeah.
Just think about that. Hundreds of miles of wiring to power all those systems. So one round going through a wire bundle, that's a bad day.
Yeah, and we had a lot of that. But
Or your rotor. I mean, that seems like that would be a vulnerable spot, like the rotors.
yeah, they are. They're vulnerable to be hit, but they're built to be sturdy enough to continue flight. We have many examples of holes being entire portions of blades being blown off, and it could still fly. Was it a rough ride? You bet. Or could you maybe an emergency landing and safely get out of the helicopter? Sure. But no, redundancies are important, and it makes the modern aircraft, much more survivable. You have a primary and utility hydraulics. You have a number one and a number two generator that provides, and two different wire bundles going to the same thing. So if one of them goes, the other one can pick that load up. You have different banks of controllers, power controllers. So again, if you lose one, the other one hopefully can pick up. And you don't pick up everything, but it's allowed to pick up, the important things.
Hey, sir. So just going right in off of your comments of number one and number two, right?
Yeah.
Tell us your scariest moment in flight.
Well, that would be the one I alluded to before. On the 23rd of March in 2003, it was about an hour and a half of direct fire engagements with the enemy, in which about 40 minutes into that flight, I was combat ineffective. The helicopter had been engaged enough and took enough direct hits that I was no longer. It was no longer a two-way battlefield for me. It was a one-way battlefield. I couldn't shoot back. My crew member and myself couldn't shoot back, and it was chaos in the battlefield. We were ahead of the FIBA, the forward edge of the battlefield, and we were deep in enemy territory. And so we were alone in the sense that if you got shot down, and we did have a crew get shot down, and they got captured, and they survived. They were later recovered by special forces. But the point is, that was the scariest event ever that I had. Have I had other mechanical failures and things that are, pucker factors? Yeah. But for sure that night, like I said, an hour and a half of flight time, in which half of it was very intense, very intense.
You were in 3rd Battalion at that time?
Nope, 6th Cav. So I was in Bravo Troop 6 Cav and 11th Aviation Regiment. There were 3 full squadrons of helicopters involved in that deployment that we were there under 11th Reg. One of them was... 2 of them were the 2-6 and 6-6 Cav, and then the other was out of Fort Hood, Texas.
Yeah, that was a very... I was with the 101st there.
They went around the west side of that large lake at the time. And again, like at that day and that time and that snapshot on the battlefield, we were in front of everybody. The MEF, the Marine Expeditionary Force, was behind us. The 101st, the 3rd ID, everybody was behind us. And our mission was to go and take out things that could hurt them. In this case, we were looking to kill and destroy. There's terms we use in the military. You can, attrit, or you can destroy, as an example. And our intent was to destroy, which was essentially make them combat ineffective for their artillery. So we had artillery as a target that night, and which artillery is horrible to the infantry. So, that was our job, to go knock out their artillery so that the infantry, the Marines, and they could move forward into Baghdad.
That's definitely very interesting, but it's shocking that you guys were able to make it out without, even be able to fire back. You just kind of had to limp home, I guess, and luckily y'all didn't get shot down. It sounds like, definitely some type of force was with you there for sure. Because like you said, bullets were coming through the cockpit. That had to just be such a scary, thing to have to deal with. I don't know. I don't think any civilian realizes how scary that would be. Yeah.
Well, and you're right. And you can't imagine it. It's an experience. That's all I can tell you. Now, if you do feel so inclined, I mentioned that movie that the crew chief made. And it's called Apache Warrior, and you can watch it online, and you can download it, and it's a pretty cool film. And
If you get us that, we'll put it down we'll put the link in the comments.
yeah, I can do that. Again, Apache Warrior is the name of the film. And it'll give you a real good idea because you hear the voices and the tension and the chaos going on because what he did was he took and with permission had actual gun tape video that's a big part of the documentary. And then you have people interviewed that describe, what was going on at the time.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. We'll definitely put a link in the description for sure. Well, kind of moving on a little bit here. I know we've been running a little bit long here, but I wanted to get to your after service career. I know that you left the military, I do believe, in 2017. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. I retired officially, November 1st of 2017.
Now, I know you mentioned that you had tried to get your commission back so you can kind of be on a good footing. What was it? I think it was Major Warrant Officer. Wasn't that what it was? Or you were trying to get that to make sure that you would be able to land in a leadership role in a company or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So simply put, I had desires to give myself options. Having the warrant officer time and a lot of flight time and experience, I figured I'd have the option to take a flying job. Give you an example, maybe a medevac, for one of the hospitals or something like that. But outside of that, I was hoping to parlay my experience as a senior leader and retire as a lieutenant colonel or something along that lines that would get me a different type of job that required more of the managerial and management than the flight side of my experience. So yes, that was my goal, was to leave the Warrant Officer Corps, become a regular officer again, and I had no intentions on a specific rank to retire to. I certainly feel good about making lieutenant colonel and retiring as a lieutenant colonel, and I'm sure it's very helpful in my civilian transition. So today, I am the director of quality, which is a close sister to being a maintenance guy. As Apache maintenance or any helicopter maintenance guy, quality is a big deal. You don't just do the maintenance and go fly and hope everything's okay. Instead, you have a production control office that does the maintenance and schedules it, and a quality control office, which basically comes in and makes sure you did it according to the processes in the book. So now I'm the quality manager for a company, and I'm the quality director, and my job is to make sure that we are doing in this company the processes in accordance with the way we say we're going to do them.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it fits you well for sure. I mean, so you feel satisfied with that? I mean, any other things that like maybe you're on your mind, today that mean a lot to you? Maybe even on the military when it comes to helping veterans. I mean, I know you said that I think you do go to the VA sometimes, right? We talked before the actual podcast began.
Yeah, sure. I think that, in my humble opinion, some of the best things you can do as a military member and you're transitioning is to get certifications in things, no matter what your skill set is. Education is when I say formal education in the sense like a bachelor's degree, or associate's degree, or even just a trade degree of some sort. They go a long way. But I see where now, as in my position, we hire folks, certifications are actually more important. Sometimes there's a requirement to have a degree. So let's say we hire a particular person and we say, well, you must have a bachelor's degree. But then certifications become even like they're your chin up, they're your leg up. So yeah, you have a bachelor's degree, but I also have certifications in these 5 different things, And again, it doesn't matter what your interest or emphasis is in, but those certifications are important. And so I would push, if I had my druthers, I would say that the military members should go and get certifications in whatever interests them, because those are the things that I think will carry them a little further and give them a lot more confidence as they transition as well. Regarding VA, I actually am involved and do use my VA for a lot of things, the medical. I'm not an active member of the VFW or any of the veteran organizations. I used DAV, the Disabled American Veterans. I used them to assist me in my transition. They were very helpful, and I would encourage anybody to use them as well. VFW, there's those organizations are very good. I just find myself far too busy with my civilian job and my family life to feel like I can partake in and be with those organizations.
Yeah, definitely still good to have those organizations around to help those people that maybe didn't transition as well as you did. Because I know there are a lot of guys that get out of the military that don't know what to do after that, and they're kind of lost.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is that those organizations are very important, and leveraging them nowadays. When you transition out of the military, it's a requirement to go through a transition course, and they bring in all of the organizations, and they bring in a lot of other professions. Guys like me, even they'll come in. They'll bring companies. They'll invite company leadership in to talk to them and help them transition. It could be something as simple as interview techniques. And so they'll teach you, they'll do mock interviews and talk to you if you're a person that says all the time. And they'll say, well, people do it. And I say, I probably said it 50 times in this interview. And some people say, no, I don't know. And you shouldn't say that. But those things help the military service members transition. And the more you take advantage of those things that are out there and go after, so you take the course, but you can use it afterwards too. There's a lot of resume building courses. They'll help you do it. You can bring all your experience in, and they'll help you build a resume. Or again, they'll steer you towards organizations that can help you. Let's say you wanted to be a program manager or a project manager, and that was your goal. There's an organization out there that you can join as a professional that helps you do that. That helps you, and you go to monthly meetings if you'd like, and so that helps you develop those things. Well, those things are all available, and they'll teach you that through those transition courses.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the people out there that are lost and don't really know what to do, they don't know about these things, or just don't have the initiative to maybe go out there and look. So, I mean, it might even be a motivation factor too, because it's depending on what the mental health looks like for that, military member that gets out of, the military. Because they definitely depression. We've talked about suicide. Those things are things those guys have to deal with too, and that lost feeling could also maybe even lead to those things.
I would agree. Especially if you're in for a long time, when I say a long time, maybe 5 years or more, you've really gotten to feel part of a very elite group. There's a small percentage of our population that volunteers to serve today, and so that those relationships you develop are very close. And then you leave the military, and you might not have that. You might not go to an organization or a neighborhood or even a state or anything. You might not be somewhere where you feel like you belong to anything. So, I would personally encourage any veteran to get out and belong to something. You could join a shooting club, like at a skeet trap range, or you might just go join a church, or just anything, a fishing group. I like fishing a lot. So, go be involved in bass tournaments. And again, those are some of those really important.
Wait, you know how to fish?
Hey, dude, don't even talk about the time I fell out of the boat and you didn't even notice. Okay.
This is another story. Oh man, what?
Yeah, this is a real story. I'd love to tell it. So we're fishing. It's Thanksgiving. We're on Lake Martin in Alabama, and Al's in the back of the boat, and I'm in the front running the trolling motor. And I fall in. Long story short, but he's got earbuds in and he's listening.
Fall in. Hey, roll credits. Sorry, go ahead.
He's not really paying too much attention to me, which he shouldn't be. We're fishing. And after I fell in, it took me a bit to get his attention. When I finally did get his attention, he ran to my assistance and pulled me in. And there I stood, 50-degree weather on Thanksgiving weekend in Alabama, and I'm soaking wet. And I pretty much stripped down to my skivvies and laid my stuff out. It was nobody's on the lake but me and Al. We didn't see another boat, I don't think, that day. And I let my stuff air dry. But shortly after that, Al actually caught 2 bass on one lure at the same time. Like he was cranking a crankbait in. He hooks into these fish, and the bass will school up, and they both bit at the same time, and he landed them both. I got a picture of it to prove it. So
that's crazy.
And and just to make that story even more exciting, Brian. So the reason why Bjorn had fallen into the lake is because he allowed me to tie my own lure on. And sure, I got it. I could tie a knot. Well, guess what? As soon as I cast that sunbow, it's gone. Well, a little bit later on, he sees it, and when he reaches out to retrieve it, well,
so it's floating in the water.
He gone.
I'm glad you said that, Al, but you didn't have to. I wasn't going to dime Al out about that knot, but that is true. That is true. And yeah, but hey, the second knot worked great.
Because you tied it. Could you imagine? Yeah. Anyway,
so he kind of helped you catch those 2 fish.
Yeah, like I said, man, my Big Al's opinion on hunting and fishing is when they call it killing and catching, I'll be there every day.
Nice. Yeah, but so just to kind of circle back on that transition and finding a purpose in your life when you leave the military. Sometimes that's a hard transition because, and I would encourage anyone leaving the military, any veteran of any number of years of service, to go out and become a part of their community, and it'll help them transition. It does give them purpose. God gave us life and a purpose, and when you find your purpose, that's going to help you not feel alone and lost. I don't know where I can help someone with that other than to tell them that those are very important things.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of the people out there that are feeling that lost feeling. I mean, I know Big Al's kind of mentioned it before in his interviews, to where, he said that the Big Al that went into the military no longer exists. And I think that's what makes it so hard for that lost, that military service member that's been in there a long time, gets out of the military. Their identity has just disappeared now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like who they were when they entered, that guy that used to like playing sorry with the family, he's not there anymore,
Yep, that's for sure. And I think that I don't think that that's unique to the military. I think that as we grow and mature and move on and do different things in our lives, we leave behind pieces of ourselves. And some people never leave their hometown, and maybe they're very similar and they do the same things, and maybe they're an exception. But I think that people in general move on and become different things. I'm sure we all can name folks we know that they never saw a church in the day in their life while you were growing up with them, and now they're active members in their church. They're a different person, or vice versa, just the opposite, maybe. That's how I see it, at least.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've had some great talks here tonight, Bjorn, and we appreciate you taking the time. We'd love to invite you back for part 2, maybe to share some more stories at some point. But I think that is about all the time we have for today, and we definitely appreciate it, man. You've definitely opened our eyes on a lot of things, and I think a lot of people are going to love your perspective on. And I think we got into some deep subjects, and then we also got into some fishing. So this is a great episode. We appreciate your time, man.
Hey, Bjorn.
Yeah, thanks for having me too. And yeah, Al.
Absolutely, bud. Before we let you go, though, man, who you going to shout out?
Who am I going to shout out? I don't know if I'm really going to shout out to anybody, to be honest, because I'd like to shout out to everybody. I could say I'd shout out to one guy, unbelievable man, that he's back in the military. He's over 60 years old. Robert Duffney. And he and I served together for a long time in Ellisheim together. And he retired from the Army, and 10 years later joined the Army again because they needed him. They needed guys to come back, and he did. And he's still in today, and he's over 60 years old, and he's out there, hooking and jabbing with the young guys and doing a great job flying Echo model Apaches.
Wow. 60 plus year old guys out there flying Apaches.
Yep. Oh,
that's
hey,
awesome.
We had them in our unit back when I was in Ellisheim. We had guys that were Vietnam vets and were much older than us, and they were our they were the go-to guys,
That's
Yeah,
nice.
those, but you don't want to look. I grew up around Vietnam uh, pilots, and because in the regiment, we have a lot of those guys around, and I'm just telling you, these are not the guys that you just want to go take a joyride with, because their idea of fun and my idea of fun are not the same.
I flew with a Vietnam pilot once in a Huey, and I hadn't flown. I'd been flying Cobras for a year or so. Hadn't flown a Huey in a while. Got basically a sign off by the commander to go fly with this guy, and he says, "Do you remember how to fly this thing?" I said, "Sure, I remember." And I'm not joking. He just sat back and put his foot up on the console. He says, "Well, it's all yours then, and from the beginning to the end." I mean, I started it, I flew it, we navigated and landed. He pretty much didn't do anything because he was just like wanting to see what I could do. And he was an old Vietnam pilot. He says, "I don't need any more flight time. You got it."
That's awesome.
I will give one more shout out to a good buddy of mine, Brett Beatty. So if you ever listen to this, Brett, shout out to you for what you did for the military and the regiment. And he's a consummate professional and a great guy.
All right. Well, I think that just about does it for all of us here at Fall In. And definitely, hopefully, you tune in and enjoy, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
All
Thanks.
it.